Well, I'm up here on Buffalo Mountain, and I'm thinking about places. I'm also thinking that the personal agency involved in the actions of music making is similar to the structuring of place through region, the process that Douglas Reichert Powell discusses in his chapter on playgrounds and dumps. Here's my first question. Can you think of a musical or sound equivalence to the spaces that he describes? What would a musical version of Winged Deer Park be, for instance? Drawing on Powell's characterization of the park as an outgrowth of the urban elite of this city, Winged Deer music might be something corporate and fitting for a McMansion out in North Johnson City in Gray, with vague historical grounding and aspirations integrated into leisure. Perhaps something like contemporary country music that has a historical connection to the past, but a very different industrial current situation. I'd be curious to hear what you think. Now, Buffalo Mountain is more diffuse, less developed. He calls it part of the redneck public sphere. It's an outlaw park, a white trash space. You know, in some ways, I think country music could work as a soundscape that would fit those characteristics as well. Well, what about Iris Glen? What sorts of music or sound are analogous to this, quote, regional profit machine, unquote, that generates corporate profit by storing waste? Perhaps the sound of this facility doesn't require an analogy. The large machines make an addition to the soundscape that might be equivalent to the addition of the solid waste to the landscape. It's interesting, even from up here, I don't know if it's coming through the microphones, but I can hear the hum of trucks and cars on the interstate. I guess the fact that there are fewer proximate sounds here makes that distant sound much more clear. We often don't notice that that sound is a part of what we walk through every day down in the city. Well, talking about sound transmission, DeWitt's article introduces an intriguing way to think about cultural transmission, a key part of ethnomusicological research. It's important how we pass something on to other people or how we receive it from them through performance, through media, or teaching. DeWitt convinces me it's important to consider the exchanges of capital involved. He talks about the player who was giving free lessons for many years, building up social capital through transmitting, i.e. teaching, his cultural capital, his musical knowledge, through without collecting economic capital, asking to be paid for it. So we have these three kinds of capital: the social capital, cultural capital, and economic capital. And if I were really good, I would make sort of a diagram with those three things, and we could talk about how flows go between or among those or not, depending on how a certain situation works. Now think about this in light of Powell's discussion of these Johnson City recreational spaces, about the cultural, social, and economic capital that flows through them. Austin Gregory's Soundpost from the 2017 version of this class provides a sense of the sound world of these spaces and dives in a little deeper in thinking about how it all works, especially in the present. He revisited the spaces that Douglas Reichert Powell talked about in that chapter. DeWitt cites Dorothy Noy's statement that weak ties are culturally powerful. They allow transmission and change across social networks. Strong ties can help perpetuate conservative vernacular culture, but weak ties allow us to connect across social, economic, occupational boundaries outside of our custom circles. And there's pluses and minuses to both of those things, as I think about it. Now, while some observers might see weakening social ties as a degradation, social capital theorists might see weak social ties as good for bridging social capital and allowing, quote, the nimble realignment of alliances that can adjust for changing conditions, unquote. To me, this sounds like diversity and resilience, ecological terms, and perhaps a good thing. Now, Miller brings up some useful questions in her article as she examines the relationship between oral tradition and the printed tune book as evolving sacred harp practice is transmitted to a far-flung community of new singers. Again, transmission is really key. The tune book that participants usually hold at shape note singing events, she says, is not just a crutch for folk enthusiasts and musicologists. It's an artifact of visual culture, a pedagogical tool, a symbol of tradition and change, and a repository for community decisions on the nature of sacred harp singing. Now further, Miller states that, quote, oral transmitted elements of sacred harp performance practice have a special capacity to index authenticity, timelessness, and tradition, which often obscures the role played by the written tradition. Unquote. Now note this reference to semiotics, the study of signs that point to and create social identity and meaning. We have an index, which is a link through actual connection. If you see smoke, that means there's a fire, right? An exit sign also gives us a lot of examples. An exit sign could be some part of the actual exit, right? Or you could have an icon showing a resemblance to what it indicates. A stick figure is an icon of a real person. You could have an exit sign with a picture of a door that would be an iconic representation. Then you can have a symbol which represents a denoted object by virtue of an interpretive habit or rule, and it doesn't have a resemblance as an icon does. So if an exit sign just says EXIT, if we didn't know the symbolic code of English and letters and reading and so on, we couldn't do anything with that sign. If it has the picture, right, that's an icon. Anyhow, knowing how these different forms of signification, it's helpful as we interpret musical and other social actions. They can help us characterize more specifically what and how things mean. Miller uses the index term since she and other singers believe that the tune books are part of a tradition and thus link through actual connections. The book is actually the connection. But again, she's emphasizing the fact that the written tradition is really important. So, if you have a few more moments, take a look at Carlsberg's short article about Polish sacred harp singing and the ways that people far away from a musical practice's origin can find ways to import it, replant it, and help it flourish. The cultural, social, and economic capital and the negotiation of signs in this situation, I think, are fascinating. What does shape note singing mean in Poland? And what resemblances or iconic connections does it have with local singing traditions? And what does this singing practice index for Polish people? Because of its foreignness, does it serve as an arbitrary symbol without indexical or iconic connections? Well, think about it. Shoot, we could consider all these things in any context here in the United States as well. Thanks for thinking on all these things and working on articulating your thoughts, especially as you keep doing work on your Soundpost projects. As you do that, keep your ears open.